Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, it depends. But first question, can you hear me? Can you see us? You just have to answer yes in the comments. Whoa, Kelly is really reactive, React Native. Okay, thank you. So, welcome to this workshop where we'll talk about no-code tools. We are Contournement. We will introduce ourselves later. And we co-organize this event with Wild Code School. And we partnered on another webinar in French with Wild Code School. And now they want it to share it to everybody. So I will let Cosmin introduce Wild Code School and himself, and then we'll begin.
Thank you very much. Hey, everybody. My name is Cosmin. I'm the campus manager for Wild Code School Berlin. I was telling earlier before going live that I think what Contournement does is it's quite interesting. And sorry if I butchered the name. French is not my native language. But basically, I was running it down to like if you need to. If you're a startup founder or if you need to launch something quick, that's definitely for you. But if you're planning on becoming a web developer, then yeah, just hit me up with an email and I'll let you know about that. I'm not gonna keep you too long here. Just gonna tell you a bit about Wild Code School. We have two main programs that we do, both in person and remote. In our campuses or remote. The programs are on web development, both part-time and full-time, as mentioned, both remote and in person, and on data analysis, both remote and in person. They go for 5 months each. We focus a lot on integrating everything, not just technical, but also in terms of working with real companies during your training, participating in hackathons, in presentations, meeting guest speakers almost every week. So we do help a lot with also building CV, LinkedIn, organizing job dating, etc. So we try to make this package that will help you land a web developer job as soon as you graduate or very soon after at least. So that's kind of it about Wild Code School. Of course, feel free to reach out and I'll be happy to tell you more. Just for you to have an idea, we're a bit older than Contournement. We're about 5 years old and we've trained more than 3,000 developers already. I'm sure that Contournement will come back quick from behind, but we're not addressing the same people, so we can just be happy to be friends and have a nice collaboration. I think our tools or offerings are very complementary. So yeah, thanks for having me, and I'm looking forward to hear more about what you have to present today.
Yeah, thank you, Cosmin. And as you said, we don't address the same people, not for the same means, not with the same means, not for the same goals. So we will talk about it, because no code and code not can be friends, but are friends, or have to work together, as you'll see it. So thank you very much.
Sure thing. Thank you.
See you later, and in the questions and comments. Bye. Thanks, Cosmin. Thanks, Cosmin, and thanks, Wild Code School, for this event. So, first thing I have to say, if you want to comment, you can comment in the comment module. But if you want to ask a question, just click on Ask a Question. You know, there is a module below, and ask your question there. Why? Because you will be able to vote the questions, and in the end, we will select the most voted question to answer them first. But we'll normally answer to all the questions. Okay? So we'll talk approximately, we'll try to talk for 40 or 45 minutes, and then we'll have questions and answers. So, this workshop was called Discover No-Code Tools. No-Code Tools are tools that enable you to create websites, web apps, mobile apps, automations without coding. You can do many things with no code, but you can't do everything. You can't do everything, and that's why code, of course, is not the contrary of no code. So to explain to you very concretely what no code is, we'll begin with two examples of projects we have developed. At the beginning of the epidemic, we have developed the project En mode confiné for Banlieue Santé. That's an association, an organization that helps people in underprivileged neighborhoods. And during the epidemic, they translated some prevention videos, healthcare videos in different languages for non-French-speaking people. And they also gave some meals, some food, some help to old people in underprivileged neighborhoods, and they needed some people to help them, some volunteers, some gifts, and all. And they needed a mobile app to put everything at the same place. And this app you see here, I'm just showing, is an app we have developed in 3 days for them that enables you to see the videos in a central place, notably for people who couldn't read or didn't understand French. It was more practical than the YouTube channel. And some forms, as I clicked, to become a volunteer or to give something. And behind, what you can't see is a big database, like a table, but more like a database made with Airtable. That is a very powerful tool to manage, to coordinate all the volunteers in the association. So there were 3 tools. The first one is Glide. Glide is a no-code tool that enables you to make mobile applications with a simple Google Sheet. And Airtable is this tool with which we made the forms, but also all the tool that is behind that I can't show you because there is confidential data. But we'll come back to Airtable. Second example, that's Zahim. She knows very well healthcare houses in France. Healthcare houses are places where people can see a doctor or have health cares. And it's not very well known in France. And during the epidemic, people needed to go to the emergencies or have ambulances, have emergency cars, but everything was crowded. So she has made a listing of all the healthcare houses in Paris so that people can see where they are, see how to call them, when they are free, who to contact. And if they wanted, they could, for example, put it into favorite. If there is a lag, that's because I'm sharing my screen. But normally you can try h24 urgence.fr, like written here, and you will have it on your mobile. You can put it into as a favorite, for example. But we ask for the email when we do that. You can filter by favorites. And what is interesting with this app is that I realized it in maybe 3 hours. And there was a bit of project management in the 3 hours. And behind this app, there is Glide. So here is the interface of Glide. For example, if I want to move this item, I just have to drag and drop it. That's very visual, like that. And it is up to date. That's a very good example of a visual editor in no code. And behind the map, there is this simple table made with Google Spreadsheet, with the name of the healthcare house, the address, the hours, the link to the image, the link to the website, and all the information that Zahim had written into it. And it gives this result when you put it in Glide. You have to modify some details, of course, but Glide tries to make the most relevant map or the most relevant listing, like here, for example, in Banlieue Santé, with the table you provide. And then you can make custom things with a simple Google spreadsheet. Those were two very concrete examples of what we can do with no code. And as I said, we made it very fast because Glide is a tool that has a very strong way of seeing no coding. Everybody can master a Google Sheet. So they said, you can't do everything with Glide, but you can do powerful things with a simple Google Sheet. And we have an interview in our podcast. That's the only one with some parts in English. We interviewed several projects that made things against the epidemic with Glide. And the co-founder of Glide just came for the introduction. So if you want to see it and listen to it, you can. And you will have the replay of this webinar, and you will have the presentation. Okay? So I just have also to repeat for the people who just came now, who came in now. If you have a question, ask it in the module, ask a question. And if someone already asked the question, just upvote it so that we don't have 3 times the same question. So hello, we are Contournement. In France, contourner, it means to bypass. So we teach people we train people to bypass technical barriers. We mainly train non-tech people who can't code and who want to create projects, who create web apps, to create websites, mobile apps. So we were a boot camp, face-to-face boot camp, but now we are mainly training people in online with e-learning. And we also built the first French-speaking community about no-code with the Slack, but also with some other tools, an ecosystem of tools, so that you can learn and master no-code. But we are mainly French-speaking for the moment. And we are 2 co-founders. We have a third guy who is now working with us. But we have set up several projects in our life. And what is interesting is that we come from coding. We know the value of code. That's why you won't hear us saying, no coding means that there will be no more coders, as you will see it later. No. For example, I have set up a company called Simplon. Simplon, that was a big network of free as beer training on coding. And when people ask us, yeah, but that's strange to have made a coding bootcamp, and now a no-code bootcamp. But what we answer is that at this moment, we saw some languages like Ruby or some frameworks like Ruby on Rails that enabled people to build things faster, that made it more easy, more accessible to learn how to code. And now that's with no-code tools we want to do it. And the difference is, with no code, you can build faster the first brick of your project, but you can't find a job. And you can be limited. So the first thing we will say is now, if you want to find a job, you will find no job with no code today. Maybe being a freelance or an entrepreneur, but not finding a job. To learn how to code, to find a job in coding, go learn how to code and do it with a good school, for example, White Coat School, who chooses the right technologies also. And we've met there in Simplon with Alexis.
Hi, so I'm Alex, and yes, I joined Simplon in 2015. That's where I met Erwan. So I have a technical background, so I'm originally a programmer, like some of you probably, and I've been the CTO of several startups. I came to Simplon to start Simplon Prod, which is the web agency of Simplon, where we would recruit some of the students to work on paid projects, websites, mobile apps, for various type of clients, some big corporations, some NGOs, so mostly non-profit that were in the same ecosystem than Simplon. And I left about a year ago, and now with Erwan, we've decided that we want to empower people to build all this by themselves with no-code tools.
So as I said, we both come from coding, production in coding, but also training in coding. So we welcome you. We'll make an introduction about the no-code movement and context. Then we'll showcase some real projects that began with no-code tools. And we will give a very large overview of what you can do without coding today. We'll do it very fast, but you will have the presentation and the replay at the end. And then we will have the Q&A. So, why no code in the way of Contournement? 0.3% of people can code in the world. And we talk about the web, about software, very advanced software or not advanced software. And many people have ideas of projects or need a digital part in their project. So what would happen if 99.7% of the other people could build things, could build software? That's a question we like to ask ourselves. And that's what no code can make easier to build things. That's what we think. And no code tools, they have been existing since years and years. For example, Bubble. With Bubble, you can build web apps, mobile apps also, but that's mainly for web apps. That's a very powerful tool. I discovered them 6 years ago, and I tried. You already could build kind of a small Twitter with it. It was powerful, but not as powerful as no-code tools are now, not as stable as no-code tools are now. So to speak, we think that since 2018, it's been 2 years since no-code tools are really mature. And there were 4 signs of it. First, in 2018, when we tested again no-code tools, we saw that they were stable, reliable, rich, and very user-friendly also. And there were also new tools, newcomers we hadn't seen before. Second sign of maturity, some startups had bootstrapped without devs, without developers, and succeeded. We'll talk about Comet, for example, a French startup, but there were other examples at Y Combinator, notably. Third sign, some no-code tools had raised some millions of dollars, had big teams, and were used by thousands of users. For example, Webflow, or Webflow is made to make advanced websites, or Bubble, they have raised, for example, Webflow is raised $72 million some years ago, so last year. So, and the fourth sign is that ecosystems had popped up around no-code. For example, no-code agencies and online trainings, etc. So when we saw those 4 things, we also saw some tweets like this one, and that's the problem we try to solve. Many people want to build projects, but they don't know how to code. They don't often have money. And as Andrew Wilkinson says, Andrew Wilkinson, he's a serial entrepreneur. He, for example, co-founded Dribble. And he tweeted, "Earlier this year, I had a productivity breakthrough. I used to spend $24K or $100,000 building an app over 3 to 6 months. It was frustrating, expensive, and slow. Then I started using no-code tools like Webflow, Bubble, Zapier, and Airtable. So we hope you'll have this same breakthrough. Even, as I said before, no-code tools can't do everything, and no code doesn't mean no code, no more coders. First, we think that with no code, more people who are non-tech people can bootstrap their project, can begin their project, become successful, and then when they reach the limits, then they need some developers. So no code equal more coders. 2, coders are needed to code no-code tools, of course. 3, learning no-code is a good start toward learning code for us. You know, you program visually with no-code, you understand some principles of programming, and then it may be easier to learn code. Or sometimes we have some students who said, yeah, now I want to learn code, I want to go further. 4, no code. You just have to know code, what can be no-coded, and then focus on coding more valuable features like algorithms, advanced front-end, etc. In startups, we also know developers who use some no-code tools to make some parts quicker, faster, and then they can code it or code the most valuable part. 5, a no-code MVP is a crystal clear or represents a crystal clear specifications and enables a better collaboration. When you make an MVP with no code as a non-tech person, you give it to a developer, there is no problem about understanding what it is. And for collaboration, project management, that's much better. And also, the non-tech person understands better what the job of a developer is. No code can be integrated with code. You'll see this. And no code for bootstrapping. No code is made for bootstrapping some projects, and code is good for finding quality jobs as a developer. As I said, there is no jobs for the moment in coding. So if you hear people who say, yeah, I want to become a professional no coder in a big company, it shouldn't be possible. And so we'll talk about websites, so simple websites and mobile websites, but also about web applications and mobile applications. With no code, you can do those 4 things with different tools and with different methodologies. So let's showcase some examples. Comet is a French startup. They put into relation, they make the link between big companies and high quality, high talented freelancers, notably in development and in data. And what is interesting with them is that when they began, they did what the startupper has to do. They did everything by hand. They found people on LinkedIn by hand. They called people by hand. They made the relation by hand. And then when they saw their value proposition was okay, they said, okay, now we have to automate some things. We have to make a platform. One of the 3 co-founders discovered Bubble. He learned his first steps with Bubble in some days, and he built the MVP, the first version of the platform. And then they grew up and developed it, and they reached $500,000 in annual recurrent revenue. So it means that they went further than the simple prototype. And then they raised $2 million, and then they hired a CTO, they hired coders so that they could migrate from no code to code, block by block, brick by brick, brick after brick. And now they still have some bricks on no code because it's more practical, but they are on code because they were limited in some ways, and it began to be a bit expensive also because they built it with Bubble, and Bubble can be expensive if you have many users and many features. And they also used Zapier and Google Sheets. So that's a very interesting example of a project that began with by hand, then with no code, and then they hired coders.
So Duelito is another example that we really like. So it comes from the fact that in the US, people have big backyards, big country, and many of them have small houses or sheds in those backyards. So there is this guy called Caleb Barkley that wondered if there would be an opportunity for a marketplace for those houses. So basically, he made 2 assumptions. 1, people are interested in selling their backyard houses at some point. 2, people are willing to buy secondhand houses. So he easily verified the first assumption by scouting the web and sites like Craigslist, where he found a lot of listings for those houses. So he gathered all those houses in a Google Sheet. And then, because he knew that it would help him kickstart his project. Then he went on verifying the second assumption. And for that, he needed to build a website that would display all the houses available in a nice way. So for that, he used a tool called Webflow. That is a very powerful tool to build website. So I need to specify that he's not a programmer, but he's a designer. So he quickly built the website. You can see the screenshot on the screen. He built that in about a day. he injected in the Webflow database all the data that he had collected in his Google Sheet. So this way it was very efficient. And as I've said, in about a day, he had a website up and running with data on it. And then he just had to promote it to get people coming. And then he needed a way to collect the leads on the houses, people who are interested. So for that, he used Airtable, a database management tool that we'll talk a bit more later. And so he made a form that people would fill if they are interested in a house, and that would store the data in Airtable. And then automatically it would generate a quote for the house in PDF, because those are expensive. You cannot buy them using your credit card. And last, he used Zapier to put in contact via email the owners of the house and the people who are interested to buy the house. And so all this was automated. He had nothing to do by hand. And all this took about 60 hours, he said in an interview, to build. And in the first month, it generated about 4,000 leads. So people got very excited. And he also became number one on Product Hunt for a day. So he definitely had a chance to verify, without coding and without spending any money, that there was an opportunity for his idea. And then that second story is L'Intendance. It's a French company. They're based in Station F, which is a big incubator. It's a great project started by Myriam and Noélie. They offer organic bulk products to be delivered. And you can buy everything online, and it will be delivered by a bike or electric motorcycle. So really recommend, if you're in France. If you're not, you can't use it, unfortunately. So let's have a look at how they build it. So they wanted to make something very attractive because it's e-commerce. So they had designers who helped them and decided to use Webflow again. And the results is very nice, as you can see. That's a screenshot on the screen. And one of the great advantage of Webflow is that they can easily update the website themselves. So for instance, if they want to put a banner on the front page, something like that, they can do it and they don't have to go through the designer. Webflow has also a built-in e-commerce system. It works very well. It works better if you're in the US. Well, in France, they had something to correct, but I'm not going to go into the details. But so basically, they used also Airtable. So every time there's a new order, they put all the data in Airtable, and they generate, with Zapier, they generate the invoice. And last thing, for the logistics, because they have to deliver. So they couldn't do everything they wanted in no code. So they used a little bit of Python. And the idea, they used it just to generate a detailed order with images to make it easy for the people in the warehouse to prepare all the packages. So as you can see in this modular approach, you can completely have parts of your stack in no code and parts of it made with code. And this work together. We never said no code tools, not combining them with code if needed. So you have always find the best and the most efficient option.
Yeah, sometimes we have some people who come with projects and ask, yeah, I want to do it in no code. And sometimes we say, no, the main feature can't be done with no code. So, or you code your project, or you code some parts and no code some others. But so yesterday's weather.
And so the last example, something also we really like, because it's a typical side project. We like side projects. So what is it? Well, basically, it's an app that shows you today's weather in comparison to yesterday's weather. It might sound a bit silly, but when you think about it, it's actually a very good way to realize what is the weather feeling like today. It was built by Drew Thomas, who used Thunkable, which is a very powerful tool, no-code tool, to build native apps, and that you can use also to connect to APIs. So for instance, in this case, Dark Sky API that gives you the weather with being given a location. So Thunkable is used to get the location, and then the API gives the weather. And with Thunkable, you can even deploy apps on the stores. So this app is actually available for $2.99 if you're interested. The story doesn't say how many he sold, but given that it took him only a day to build that, I think it was worth a shot to try and put it online. And he also made a free web version for it using Bubble, but I'll tell you a little bit more about Bubble later on.
And There is a methodology we recommend with no-code tools, because with no-code tools, you can make very long projects, overkill projects, too ambitious projects. No. With no code, you have to think MVP. You have to get the MVP approach. It means minimum viable product, the simplest brick that enables you to test your project and to make it evolve. For example, the first line is not having the MVP approach. You just want to make a car and begin with 1 wheel, 2 wheels, and then the body of the car. And 2 years later, maybe you will have a car that is ready, functional, and maybe people will use it, adopt it, but you're not sure of it. That's just a bet. And the second line here on the slide is the MVP approach. I want to make something that rolls fast and that enables people to go faster. So in some hours, I just create a skateboard, okay? Then people use the skateboard. I see how they use the skateboard. I see that they sometimes fall on the floor. So to get it better, I won't put a motor behind it as I intended to do. No, I will put, like on a bike, some piece where people can be more stable. And in some days, I create a scooter. With this scooter, people are happier. Then I create a motorbike, a bike, then a motorbike, That's what we call the lean startup approach. You have an idea, everybody have ideas. Then you build something, the first product, the first brick. That's where no code can help you, because with coding, it depends on the project. But sometimes there are things that you could do faster and in a more simple way with no coding, notably for non-tech people. So you build your first brick, then you measure how people use it, you get data, you learn, you take conclusions and say to yourselves, I have new ideas, so I will build something else. Maybe I will make my brick bigger, maybe I will make a second brick, maybe I will throw my first brick away and then build another. So that's how you have to do in the lean startup. And that's what we call iterations, agile iterations. So we think that no code has sense with this methodology. Another point of methodology, that's the two approaches to no code. The first one is the all-in-one approach. You put all the stack in one tool. You build your project with a very powerful and advanced tool. For example, Moble. Moble, as we already explained it, is a very powerful app builder. But to learn it, you have to spend some weeks to learn it. That's sometimes less funny, less user-friendly than some other tools. So, but it's really, really powerful. That could be why you choose the integrated way or not. The modular way, the modular approach, that's combining tools, choosing a tool for each part of the project. For example, combining Typeform for forms, Airtable for the database, Webflow for the website, and Stripe for payment. So let's illustrate this modular way, and then we'll talk about the all-in-one way. Let's imagine I want to create a service that enables people to borrow music instruments to other users. First, I need a website where I can show my service and where users can access it. This first brick, it's called the UI, the user interface. We listed here several website builders you could use, from the simplest to the most advanced. Weebly, for example, after 1 hour, you will be able to create a web page quite custom as you want, but you will be limited in many ways. Webflow, on the extreme other opposite, you can really do what you want. That's like if you made HTML, CSS, JavaScript, but without coding. That's like a mega Photoshop of coding, and you can export no coding, and you can export your code and host it somewhere else if you want. So Webflow is really very advanced, but for many use cases, it's overkill. And if you want to become a Webflow developer, you have to be ready to learn for some weeks You have to, if you are a designer, that's even better. But Weebly, you can learn it in 1 hour. Webflow, you need some weeks. Then people need to send and publish their instrument offers. All right. This second brick, that's to enter data. So we talk about forms. We talked about Typeform. Typeform is a very important piece of no-code combinations because it's powerful, it's elegant, that's a very good tool for forms. But sometimes there are things you can't do. For example, with JotForm, you can pre-fill some fields according to whom you send the form. So that's an alternative, JotForm. And there are some other native options. For example, in Webflow, you can do forms, but they are not very powerful. In Airtable, that's the same, but the advantage is that it goes directly into the database. And Google Forms, it's very famous, very simple, very user-friendly. And sometimes, for example, with Glide, you use a Google Sheet to make your mobile app. So the Google Form can be relevant. And of course, I need somewhere to store those data so that I can use them in my service. That's the brick where you store data. As we saw with Glide, you can store data in a Google Sheet. Airtable is a very powerful tool to make to use databases without being a developer. You can, for example, display your database into a calendar form, into a map form, into a gallery form. And you can link database to one another. That's very powerful and very visual. And Integromat also is an alternative to Airtable. They are Czech, and that's an interesting alternative. Then it can be useful if users get a notification when someone wants to borrow their music instruments. That's the fourth brick, automation and programming. So Zapier can connect applications between one another. They have very rich library. Integromat, you can also automate some process. Parabola or IFT, that's for the name, if this, then that. Well, that's not very powerful, but we like how it's called. And Phantom Buster also is a French one. To scrap and automate some processes. And last but not least, to close their deals, user may have to pay for what they borrow. And that's not a loan, but a leasing then. That's the external services. For example, Stripe, you can pay with it. You can connect with its API, so you can do many things to pay. Even with coding, notably. Many coders use Stripe. One Signal is made to implement some push notifications on mobile. MailerLite, MailChimp, SendGrid for newsletters, but also for transactional emails, for email notifications. That can be an important part in no-code to notify with email. And Twilio to use SMS in your app. That was the different levels of the stack and the tools with it. Now, the all-in-one way with Alexis.
Okay, so let's take a closer look at the tools that can do everything. But before that, just a small thing. So Vlad Magdalene is the CEO of Webflow, and he tweeted that he was very happy to hear that people were referring to the AWZ stack. So if there are developers among you, you know AWS, which is the Amazon Web Services. But in the no-code world, there is AWZ, which is Airtable, Webflow, and Zapier. And Bubble was quick to note that Bubble can basically replace Webflow, Airtable, and Zapier because it does everything at the same time. So let's have a look at Bubble. So Bubble has been around for almost 8 years now. It's a very powerful tool. It's very, very stable because it's been tested and used for a while. It has big and very active community. Like they have a forum where you will find all the answers to everything you might have in mind. And it also has big ecosystem. So there are a lot of companies around Bubble that build plugins, that build templates, that build courses. So that's very interesting because it will give you a lot of potential ways to learn how to use it, because it's more difficult to use to Bubble than all the tools we've mentioned before. There's a bit of a learning curve, but it's very powerful. If you see, so there's a screenshot here of Bubble. So basically, you have a white canvas where you can drag and drop elements, and then you can build all your interface there, and then you can do programming with the workflows. You can manage data with the database. You can manage the styles. There are the plugins. So basically, they literally abstracted all the work of a developer in a visual way. So this is very powerful. So yeah, you should definitely check it out. There are some other alternatives, but you'll have a look. I'm not going to mention them. We will send you the slides anyway, so you should definitely check out everything there's in it. And last thing, because I'm sure a lot of you are interested in building mobile applications, well, there's some no-code tools, obviously, to do that. I'm not going to talk about them all, but I just want to mention Adalo, which I really, you should really check. It's really very interesting. It's not as powerful as Bubble, but it's very easy to use. Like you can see a screenshot there of Adalo. Really, well, I can do an entire webinar on it, but we have to go to the questions. So, well, I'm not. You should really check it out. There's also Thunkable as an alternative, and DraftBit. DraftBit can be interesting if some of you are developers, because DraftBit, you can export the React Native code in DraftBit, so that can be very interesting. You do like the visual assembling of the interface, you export the code, and then you can finish up with writing like the React Native workflows and everything that you want in it. And Glide, you already know, and AppSheet was recently bought by Google, so there's a lot of things happening in the ecosystem.
Yeah. To sum it up, Glide, we saw it at the beginning. That's really simple, really accessible. On the other opposite, there is Bubble. That's very powerful, but can be harder to learn. But Adalo, the one we just talked about, is right in between. That's quite accessible, but you can go very far with it. But you have to learn it before doing anything. So the great overview about no-code. We'll go very fast, and you have the presentation if you want to get it back. We can no-code some newsletters and email notifications. We can transform a database into a website. We can make e-commerce. We can build API. We can call APIs and give access to some APIs, create some APIs. We can make scrapping, chatbots, vocal assistants, 3D and VR, AR, virtual reality, augmented reality, video games, AI and machine learning, blockchain, and Internet of Things. Of course, you can do some powerful things with some of those tools, but you can do very limited things with some of the tools. Sometimes you can just prototype something. Sometimes you can really build something. It depends. So that's our website, contournement.io. We're mainly French-speaking for the moment, but we may create some content in English soon. That's a website where we give free resources for free if there are some French-speaking people here. In France also, we give some office hours, some live podcasts, some online courses. We give boot camps so that people can release their own project with no code. And we have shipped and we will ship 4 online courses. First one to kickstart one's project, another one on automation with Zapier, another one on organizing with Airtable, and a last one that will be released soon about mobile with Adalo, and maybe we'll make an English version. So if you want to be kept to get the news, we will send an email if there is something in English. So thanks Thank you very much for your attention. Here are our contacts and our social networks, and let's go to the questions. So, I see 3 questions. If you want to ask questions, don't forget to ask them in Ask a Question or to come and vote the questions that are here. What are the situations when you definitely don't recommend no code? Very good question. There are some precise use cases. For example, we had a client when we used to produce some websites and web apps, but now we focus on training. They wanted to generate automatically some pictures, some astrological maps with your name, your date of birth, your place of birth. And we said, no, to automate image generation with some data, we definitely can't do it with no code. So we recommend, and on the other way, on the other part, they wanted an e-commerce website, but when we saw the features, we said, really, if we make it with no code, we will be more free. It will be easier for you to modify some things on the interface. But if you use Magento, for example, that can be a good choice also. And moreover, you have to code the map generation. And finally, we use no code and combined it with code for this map generation. But that's a very good example of a problem no code can really not solve. Generally, to make algorithms, that's not very recommended to use no code. But I don't know if you have some other ideas.
No, I mean, it's like anything where really there's strong need for algorithm, programming, things like that.
Yeah.
It's really the...
And sometimes some tools are not good for something. For example, Bubble, that's very powerful. But for the design, it's for the responsive, it can be a bit tricky and hard to, but you can do very good things with Bubble. But if you have very strong design goal, you may prefer Webflow. But in Webflow, you can't develop some features, some powerful features with profile, user profiles, and all. So you have to choose between code and no code according to what we just said. But sometimes between the no code tools, you really have to make the right choice, and that's why we invent. Also, that's why we exist. Excuse me. That's to give consultancy on the right way to do one's project or one's learning. 0.3% knows how to code, but how many are able to code? Interesting. That reminds me about that was I think you know the FizzBuzz test. You know that's a test for programmers. You have to display to print a series of numbers, and if you can divide it by 2, it displays fizz. If you can divide it by 3, it displays buzz, and if it's divisible by 3 and 2, it prints fizz buzz. And on this test, so many so-called programmers in the United States failed. You know, that was in 2010, and they were free on choosing the technology they wanted. So yeah, that's a true question. How many are able to code or not? And no code for us is a good way to reach your goal faster. But of course, if you don't know how to code, you will be sometimes limited. I think that's really not the same way of working. You know, I remember Alexis at the beginning of Contournement, when he was no coding, he was saying, "Yeah, that's crazy. We can do many things, but I lack the sensation of just writing something very smoothly that gives many commands behind, you know." So that's there would be some things to write about it. Thinking about Scratch App Inventor, I think no code requires the same logic, if, loops, lists, variables, than code. It helps not having to learn a language, but you need the logic. Agree? Of course, and that's why we often say to people, no coding doesn't mean it's easy, first, and no coding doesn't mean you don't have to know some concepts of programming, of tech, and that's why also we say that sometimes no code can be a good way of understanding programming concepts and what the code is useful for. When you talk about Scratch, I don't know if that's still the case, but during a time, at Harvard in computer science, they learned Scratch to begin before learning coding, because visually they made some operations, like you just say, without coding, and then they said to them, so now if you want to code this, that's like that. So yes, you have to, there is kind of a logic, and even for front-end stuff, it just abstracts the job of a developer. With Webflow, that's the same box model as CSS. If you're good at Webflow, you understand many things about front-end development. And for the logic, that's the same. Someone who builds a first app with a DALO, he will understand what a database is, what a user is, what many concepts. Yeah. So I see Mike asking about ageism in tech. I think that may be rather a question for White Coat School, but we know a bit the subject. I think there are some places where there is some ageism, some trainings also, but I think there are also some people who are not concerned about it, but who will mainly test you to see what are your skills. And if you have a diploma, no diploma, if you're 40, 50, or 18, they may not care about that. But in the no-code game, we mainly see people who are between 25 and 40, I think, but mainly 25, 35. And I hope that's like many other profiles in tech. I know White Coat School speaks about it. We want to have a voice about it also, to say, coding, no coding, that's for everybody, because there can be some sexism, some ageism, and all. And no, those are skills everybody can get if they work hard and practice, you know. So maybe ask this question to White Coat School. They will have maybe more details than we have, maybe. No code may be more expensive than code regarding the tool's cost and not the cost of time.
Yeah, it's definitely the case, because when you code, usually you use open source software, open source frameworks, open source languages. Well, you always have to pay for the hosting when you have when you code a project. And for the tools, well, you pay both for the tools and the hosting usually, because all those tools are cloud based, like Webflow. So they also do the hosting. So you pay for both, and it's not necessarily very expensive, because it's but yeah, I mean, it has to be a little more expensive than coding. And then, well, given that it saves you a lot of time, we might factor in the fact that, if it saves you time, it saves you money. But I understand the question is more about the tools themselves.
And also it can add money, add value, so to speak, because all the time you won't spend on solving simple but time-wasting problems. All the time you won't spend on resolving some project management and communication problems. That's time you can spend on releasing features that are time to market or that feed the user. So there is also all this added value of many problems you don't have to solve and to manage, notably non-technical problems. That's also how I would say it. So I think that's... there is another one. What about the confidentiality of no-code tools? Do you want to get it, Alex, or?
Yeah, sure. Well, confidentiality is... well, let's say all those tools, so as I've said, they're hosting what you're creating. So they have to take account of the security of the data. So all the data, like for all we know, we haven't heard of any data breaches of tools like Bubble, like Webflow or Airtable. So well, as far as we know, they have quite good like technical teams. They have good security measures. It's more likely that you will badly configure that you will use the tools the wrong way and give access to your data than the host itself and the tools themselves. So, but that's why you need training. All those tools are very interesting, but it's you have to learn how to use them properly. And that's also why we exist.
For example, with Glide, as you saw at the beginning, your data is stored in a Google spreadsheet. If you share this Google spreadsheet with the entire world through a public link, of course, there will be a security problem, a confidentiality problem. But for the other part, as Alex said,
I think, okay, so there is a comment. I think the comment is like, maybe because you design it on the tool itself, they can look at what you're doing and, I don't know, steal it or something. I think, honestly, they have better things to do. If they are like Webflow and Bubble, they are working very hard on the tool, on the project themselves. So they don't care so much about looking at what you're building.
Yeah, and in some
same
way,
with Google, and like depends if you're worried that Google is looking at your docs and slides and all this. I think it's the same.
And let's imagine you're hosting your website on your app that is still not public on Heroku or I don't know what tool. That could be the same problem, you know. But now their business model is clearly to make you pay for their product. There is a free version and a paying version. But for the moment, we didn't hear that kind of stories or about selling your data. You know, they are not Facebook, or that's not their business model. So,
thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we will email you the slides and the replay this afternoon. And if there is something in English one day, maybe next month, maybe next year, maybe never. If there is something, we will email you to keep you in touch. You will be among our first international receivers. So thank you very much. Thank you to White Code School, to Anna, to Cosmin, and everybody. And have a good evening or a good other part of the day. Depends on where you are in the world. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.